Welcome back to the Impact Storytelling Podcast. I'm your host, Sabinemprobst, ocean conservation storyteller and NGO director. And today, we meet Janis Argeswara, a marine megafauna conservation scientist who has dedicated her life to understanding and protecting these magnificent creatures. Janice works with the Marine Megafauna Foundation, where she leads research on manta rays, sea turtles, and microplastic pollution across some of Indonesia's most iconic marine protected areas. Her work bridges science and conservation, using evidence-based research to guide management decisions and empower local scientists through education and capacity building. We will hear about her scientific discoveries, the challenges of fieldwork in some of the world's most biodiverse waters, and what it truly means to protect life beneath the waves. Welcome to the podcast. I'm happy to have you here and talk about your research. You grew up in Jakarta, a city far from coral reefs and manta rays. Can you take us back to your first memories of becoming fascinated with the ocean?
During the holidays, my family and we would go to this place called Anyer, which is kind of the far west of Jakarta. It's about maybe a 2-hour, 3-hour drive to the beach. It's not the best beach, but it was a beach. And so growing up, going there almost most holidays, that's kind of the only thing that I remember of the beach and actually liking it. But I remember my first time going to Bali with my aunt, and it made me realize I actually really like, the beach, being in the water. But it wasn't really that made me want to work in marine science. It was more because I watched a lot of documentaries and was like, "Ooh, I want to work with big animals." Yeah.
And then you decided to study marine science in Bali. What drew you there? Was it the first time you went there with your aunt? And what was your first real research experience like?
It was actually going to Bali for my undergraduate studies was actually really nice because I remember during high school, I did not really I didn't have like a proper holiday. A lot of during the high school times, it was just I didn't have a proper holiday. I remember writing in my journal like I really want to go to Bali, and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, here you're gonna live in Bali for the next 4 years. So it has been great. I really like it, and I studied marine science because I wanted to learn more about the ocean animals, and I chose Bali also because if you're going to study marine science, then you'd have to study near the ocean. That only makes sense, right? But I learned a lot during my degree, starting from like the smallest stuff in our oceans, the plankton, and I learned a lot about fish biology. Parts of the fish, the tropical ecosystem of mangroves, seagrass, and coral reefs. And then it was not until my last year of my studies when I learned about marine megafauna and manta rays.
And your thesis for your undergraduate studies looked at microplastic in manta ray feeding ground at Nusa Penida. At that time, microplastic research in Indonesia was still emerging. How did you decide to take that challenge?
Well, it was actually part of my old boss's PhD. So she was the first person to did a PhD on microplastics and megafauna. And when you're doing a PhD, there's a lot of different things that you want to do, but you cannot do everything. And so I was doing that part of where she wanted to do more chemical analyses on the samples, which I was able to take for my undergraduate thesis. That's kind of how I got involved. But after doing a lot of plastic work, I realized I actually prefer working on the manta rays and the plastics. it can be a bit depressing, right? But it was definitely a good introduction to manta ray threats and pollution in general. So yeah.
And what shocked or intrigued you most about the connection between plastic pollution and marine megafauna like manta rays?
It's just the fact that they are feeding so many microplastics. Um, they feed on long hours. They feed a lot of water volume every single day, and especially during this time of year, which is the rainy season. Rainy season is starting. It's when the trash from the riverbanks are pushed down to sea, and that's when trash is the highest. So it's just very concerning that these giants that rely on plankton um, feed on microplastics, which is not at all nutritious, doesn't help with their energy. So yeah, it's very, very concerning.
And do you know how much of the microplastic stays in them when they eat on it?
So manta rays actually ingest approximately between 40 to 60 microplastic pieces per hour, I think. Yeah, per hour. So it is not a lot in comparison to the number of the plankton that they ingest. Like it's still, the ratio between microplastics and plankton is still not like 50-50. It's still very much small, but with more stuff, the numbers would probably get higher and higher, which can be really concerning, given the fact of like how plastics, a lot of them, a lot of the bad stuff like heavy metals or other really bad chemicals can stick onto plastics, and like when manta rays ingest them, there's a chance that they might get all of these bad stuff that's sticking to the plastic. So yeah.
And you co-authored a paper titled What's in the Soup, which examined microplastic in manta ray feeding ground. Can you tell us how that study came to life and what you discovered there?
So from our study, we found out that the plastics that made most of the plastics we found in Manta Bay, which is the feeding ground of manta rays, is actually made from two of the most produced plastic globally, which is polypropylene and polyethylene, which is not surprising because, they are the two most produced plastics. So it makes sense that they are there. We did find traces of polystyrene, and also some fishing line as well. Although the amount of those type was not as many as the polypropylene and polyethylene plastics. It just showed that the plastics that we found there were mainly the ones that are top produced. Yeah.
Mhm. And what kind of items are produced out of the plastic?
So it's a lot. It varies. Some of them, for example, like plastic bags, it's very common in food packaging, like candy wrappers. Some of the harder plastic as well, like buckets. So it really varies between items, and the description of items also vary, but they're made out of basically similar materials. Yeah.
And as you said, your study found that manta rays could be ingesting up to 62 plastic pieces per hour while feeding. That's quite shocking figure, I'd say. What does this mean for the health of these animals and the ecosystem they live in?
That's a very good question because that's one of the things that we actually haven't really confirmed yet. We need to do more studies to see how manta rays actually respond or react to microplastics. And to do this, we would need to take a biopsy sample or a tissue samples from the manta ray and see if there's anything abnormal within their tissue cells. But also the thing is, we cannot really confirm if they're from the plastics or from something else. These are just some things that we haven't gotten to yet. But like I previously said, there is a potential that the manta rays might get all the bad chemical stuff that is like around the plastic when they ingest a lot of it. But yeah, that study hasn't been done yet.
But the follow-up study you did, Microplastics on the Menu, expanded to include whale sharks and multiple Indonesian feeding grounds. What new insights did that broader study reveal about pollution patterns and seasonal variation?
So that paper was written by my old boss, by Dr. Alisa Germanoff, who was the one who did the PhD that I kind of glued myself onto. That study showed how these three sites, Pantai Bentar in East Java, Nusa Penida, and Komodo National Park, all have microplastics in it, which is not surprising. But it is unfortunate, as the areas that she sampled were areas that are from feeding grounds, which means that these megafauna, whale sharks, and manta rays feed on a daily basis in that area. This also shows how we would need to find more. The thing is with microplastics, it's hard to mitigate, or it's hard to no, don't go out to the sea, because they're so small. And if you want to find the root cause of microplastics, is to go back all the way to land, to management, and to actually prevent these plastics from going into the oceans in the first place. One thing that we can also do is to actually use seasonal patterns, such as like a rainy season and dry season, as a model, or like to see approximately where these trash will be going and when it will actually peak going out to the ocean. So a lot of preventing from it going to the ocean, but also understanding where they might go, what season, and um, going back to the roots of people, human behavior intervention, because a lot of this is like where people are deciding if they want to throw their trash out in the river, and a lot of it, either they're ignorant or they don't understand, but I'm pretty sure most of it is just people being ignorant.
And do you think that maybe the best solution would be to change something in policy so that the trash wouldn't be thrown down and couldn't end up in the river, or some better ways for the trash to be put in the right bins or more bins?
The thing is, like, when you're talking about trash, the first thing, there are a lot of things actually, but the first thing is like human behavior intervention. So making sure people understand why trash should be segregated, should be separated first, how it can be dangerous, for the health when people live nearby unmanaged waste areas. So it's a lot of bringing people's awareness to plastic, to trash in general, not just plastic, but trash as well, also food waste. But on the other side of things is where decision makers, like governments, should do, right? They should prepare a good and a reliable waste management system, um, and they should make a policy, and they should monitor and make the consequences real, So it's a lot of different factors, but also producers, like big companies that produce sachets or drinking bottles, they need to be accountable as well, and understanding that it's their production that's filling up our landfills.
And after graduation, you joined the Marine Megafauna Foundation in Indonesia. How did that opportunity come about, and what was it like stepping into a professional conservation team for the first time?
It was actually really interesting. MMF in Indonesia, we are a small team, so it's not like I was stepping into a 20-person organization team in Indonesia. A lot of us actually work remotely because we have like different sites and everything. But I was really, really grateful for my then boss, Dr. Alita Germanov, who really helped me get into the world of marine megafauna and conservation. And, she really trained me to be a good scientist and also just keep questioning, whenever there's a study, what is the gap? What haven't they done? What is needed? And with MMF as well, I actually got to explore different parts of Indonesia, which I think is a very, very big privilege. Indonesia is such a massive country, and being able to travel for work and to see how different places have different wildlife, it was a very, very privileged thing for me to do.
And it sounds amazing to see all these different places and get to see all the different animals. And MMF's work in Indonesia focuses on critical manta ray irrigation areas like Nusa Penida, Komodo, Sangalaki, and Raja Ampat. I hope we said that somewhat right. What makes these sites globally significant to manta ray conservation?
So these 4 sites have been academically, scientifically identified as a manta ray aggregation sites. Yeah. In Indonesia, Raja Ampat has 2 of the Indo-Pacific manta ray species, and in Nusa Penida and Komodo, there are also massive aggregation of reef manta rays over there. In the Rawan, we've only started our data collection again, and we've identified still like less than 200 manta rays. So it's not as significant. It's not as large as Nusa Penida and Komodo. But these places, they are identified as cleaning stations and feeding grounds, basically critical habitats where these animals stay, where these animals kind of live. And we've seen a lot of pregnant manta rays as well, and also baby mantas, indicating that this place must be good enough that the pregnant mantas and baby mantas are around. So that's why these 4 sites, they're really important to monitor and to protect and to manage properly, because in Indonesia, these places attract a lot of tourists as well. So while we protect them because these areas are important areas for these animals, but also it's to protect the income of the locals in tourism.
So the tourists are allowed to go into these protected areas?
Yeah, so some places like in Nusa Penida, there are zonations where the zonations are for tourism and where they are for, well, a no-take zone, so nobody can go there unless for certain things. But yeah, because manta rays are very much friendly, they're gentle giants, and they're literally a money-making object because they're so friendly and people really like seeing them. They're very charismatic. They're very majestic, and so they are acted as tourism objects. But up until now, a lot of these manta rays and also whale sharks in some places, it's just like, oh, they generate a lot of money, but less of, do you think they're happy here? We're do you think we're forcing their boundaries? It's more of like, oh, they're making us get more money, but less of, are we pushing their boundaries? Are we intervening their day-to-day too much? So that's kind of more of the things that we need to make sure that manta rays like being here, and that tourism still gets the money with their presence.
Yeah. I think it's a problem in a lot of places with megafauna now that everyone wants to see them. Everyone thinks that they are really cool to look at and to be close to them. But then often there's too much tourism already that there is a pressure on the animals and the ecosystem already. But of course, I guess tourism still is better than overfishing them. So the local kind of jobs in the tourism industry rather than the
Yeah,
fishing industry.
for sure. Like the the tourism industry will not decrease the amount of manta rays like fisheries would. Right? There's no direct impact to it, but yeah. Also, anything that is not well managed will suck eventually.
And Indonesia was once among the top 3 manta fisheries in the world. What have been some of the key changes or signs of hope you've witnessed since protection were put in place?
So I was slightly working on this for my thesis, where I kind of looked into how the population of manta rays is going, not in Indonesia, but specifically in Penida for now. We're trying to work on the Komodo paper, hopefully next year. But so far, our findings showed that manta ray population are actually increasing. They're quite stable, but they're quite like slowly increasing. So not like a peak, but just like slowly increasing, which is good. It's very good, even though manta rays are globally decreasing, but in some places there are like increasing populations. And to be honest, like for me, I'm pretty sure this incline, this stable population growth is only because, well, first off the protection, but also because of tourism. Um, it's been shown that places where manta rays became tourism objects, is where the manta ray population is stable and increasing. But in places like in Mozambique, where MMF also have an office there, manta rays are declining up to 90%. And that's because manta rays over there, they are not fully protected. And they're not as big of a tourism object like they are in Indonesia. So I think it really depends on the area as well. And fisheries are still happening in other parts of the world. And not just fisheries, but also entanglement from ghost nets, from fishing lines, which can also cause death to manta rays. And even though like with tourism, there's not like a direct impact on manta rays, but boats from tourism can definitely kill manta rays, because that's one of the things that happened a couple of weeks ago. Was a boat in Florida. They went so fast, and there was a manta underneath them. And it was caught in a drone, like the video. There was a drone video of it, and eventually, the manta's back was like cut, which is the spinal area, and so it things like that. Not directly fisheries, but yeah, there's still a lot of homework for us to do.
Definitely, I've heard it in many places around the world that the motors of the boats are definitely something to worry about as well if the boats are going too fast and not looking out where the animals are. Sometimes even happens with the tourism boats, even though they're looking for the animals, they still then
Yeah,
charging towards somewhere where they think they see something.
yeah, exactly.
And you've been leading the manta ray reproductive ecology project. Why is understanding reproduction so critical for protecting manta populations?
So manta rays, they have what we call a low reproduction productivity rate. That's a lot, but basically, manta rays, they we can call them adults when they're about 8 to 10 years, so it's quite a long time. And when they're adults, that's when they are able to reproduce, right? When they are able to be engaged in courtship and mating. And when the mating is successful, the female manta ray, she will be pregnant for 1 year. So it's a long time to carry a baby. And if it's successful, usually she will only carry one baby, maximum two. So it's a very, very long time. Like you would need, let's say 9 years until mature, and then you'd have 1 year of pregnancy, and you can only have one baby at a time. And so naturally, their birth rate is quite low. And then you have all these incoming pressure, incoming threats from anthropogenic, like from humans, whether it be like mortality rate getting up because of fishing line, boat strikes, fisheries, or climate change, where, different in temperature and pH because of ocean acidification and whatnot could change the quality and the amount of plankton in our oceans, which make them not have food to carry the baby. So it's a lot of factors in which manta rays can decide to have a baby, because they need to think it first, right? Like, well, I have enough food this year if I want to carry a baby. Is the area that I'm in safe enough for me when I'm pregnant, when I'm really pregnant? And manta rays, female manta rays, their baby, they carry their babies almost half their size. That's why she needs a lot of energy and a lot of time, and just to make sure the conditions are good and perfect for when she's pregnant. And because the conditions are never always good, right? In some months, some years we have super hot years, some years we have super rainy years, very dry, and some of them very wet. And so manta rays, some of them do have back-to-back pregnancies, but most of them don't. If they're pregnant this year, they're like, oh, I want to wait 2 years until I want to get pregnant again. So it's this low reproductive rate that is a low reproductive rate and the incoming threats. That's why it's very important to understand how they reproduce, where, when, what factors influence their reproduction, and things like that.
So it's thought that they decide when they want to get pregnant?
Kinda. We were not sure if they actually decide, or how they decided, but that's how we describe it, because it really depends a lot on the conditions of the oceans and whether the plankton this time of year have been good enough for them to actually, because it's a commitment, right? Here she has to carry this baby for a year. So yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a long time to carry a baby, especially if it grows up to be half your size. And how does focusing on estimating manta ray abundance using capture mark recapture methods help scientists measure population health and recovery?
So the capture mark recapture method uses the data that we have to model, to estimate how it's going to look like in the next couple of years. And MMF in Indonesia, we've been collecting data since 2012. And so it's, over 12 years now. And it is good enough, it's very good actually, to use that data to actually estimate what it's looking like in the next couple of years. And that's how I was saying that my thesis showed that in Bonita, the numbers are slowly growing. And so far we have been seeing new manta rays, and we have been seeing smaller manta rays recently, which is good. That means like the mamas gave birth, and we have a new batch of babies here in this area. And that's how, and with more data, with more long-term data, we're able to predict them more accurately and to tell people like, hey, that they're increasing, like, should we maybe make better limitations, make better regulations to make sure that these animals stay here and they grow more and more higher. So that's kind of how population abundance estimates can help. And that's why long-term monitoring is also very important, because the earlier you start collecting your data, and when it goes sustainably, like long-term, it's like citizen science use, that's when you can actually use the long-term data to predict what will happen later.
And given that manta rays are so slow to reproduce and highly migratory, what are some of the biggest challenges in tracking and protecting them across Indonesia's vast marine areas?
That's a very good question. So we do know manta rays, they travel beyond jurisdictions, right? Beyond like MPA, go to I want to go here and there. They don't care about these lines that we made. Um, and so one of the things that a colleague, Dr. Edi Setiawan, did in Raja Ampat, where he did his PhD, was he tracked the manta rays using satellite and acoustic tags to see where they go, how often do they visit that site, how long are they there for, and so these tags help us see potential critical habitats for manta rays. Like, ooh, this is a site where we've never been to, but looks like the manta rays go there pretty often. Let's check it out. Like, why are they there? But also with juvenile manta rays, he was able to see that the smaller manta rays, the juvenile manta rays, they use a specific area in Raja Ampat for the first couple of years of their life in comparison to the older ones. And so telemetry, basically the study of the movement of these animals, is really, really important in identifying critical habitats and seasonality. So when are they there for regulations to better manage the waters, but also to look at other critical habitats that they might be using, so that we know what to look for, or like we know, this area seems like a good place for manta rays. Maybe in a couple of years they'll be here. Yeah. So a lot of telemetry studies, but also we need a more comprehensive regional collaboration between governments. Um, because yeah, it's not just Bali, they go here and there. So the other government in other places, they also need to be aware of that these mantas are going to their sites as well.
One of MMF's strengths is capacity building, training Indonesian scientists and partnering with local universities like Udayana. Why is investing in local expertise so vital for long-term conservation success?
In a lot of places that I know, conservation work usually starts with a foreigner, someone from the West, to come to a place and then build a conservation project. Um, but they leave. After this project finishes, they will go back to their country and leave, and they won't be back. And the conservation work is just for that project. But when you invest in locals and Indonesians, in this case, we're in Indonesia, you can make sure the project runs even though you're not there anymore, because the people from that area are the ones who's doing the work. Now, that being said, you cannot have someone working on free labor, right? Like, they need to get paid. And so um, it's also really important to establish collaborations and have funding sustainably to fund the locals to actually do this project. And so um, having locals having invest in locals is firstly to ensure the project runs, and that's how you can get like the long-term monitoring data, but also a lot of empowerment. um, in MMF Indonesia, I specifically only hire Indonesian staff. And that's because I want to make sure that Indonesians are the one taking care of their own oceans. Obviously, I need help a lot. I ask for training, I ask for help from all of my international colleagues, but the one doing the work, the one writing the paper and everything, is still, I want to make sure that it comes from Indonesia, and kind of have ownership of our oceans here.
Yeah, I think it's great that locals get the opportunities to work on their environments and in their nature, and not just people coming from the outside. Maybe coming from the outside to help, as you said, but then still like working closely with the locals, and like the overhand should be by the locals, the decision making and the leading of the project.
Yeah, for sure.
Have you seen a change in local awareness or tourism practices since the research findings on plastic pollution were shared with governments and marine park managers?
So during that time, we've had quite some people kind of no longer using plastic, and there was a big plastic ban in Bali and also in Java in Indonesia. Yeah, in West Java, in Jakarta as well. But during COVID, everybody used plastic because it was the only safe way to do things, and so that kind of increased again. Nowadays, a lot of people are more aware with their plastic uses, and they choose to be they choose to not have a lot of single-use plastics in their house. But it's still not enough, as a lot of a lot of the ones who use the reusables are cut in the city, but actually the people in the coast, there's still a lot of them using single plastic, and it could be an economic factor as well, since single-use plastic is cheaper, but it's not making as big as an impact as much as what I personally would like to. And again, like even though our microplastics project has been published and has been disseminated, when you go back to the government, it really depends on their priorities, right? And when you talk about plastics, with especially microplastics, especially to mantas, not even to humans, it becomes less of a priority. But I do know that in Indonesia, they are trying to make waste management much, much better. It's just the pace of things and the technology and funding.
Funding is always a big problem with environmental things, I have the feeling.
It's a problem, yeah.
Yeah. And probably even if locals make more effort, then I think Indonesia has a lot of tourists all the time as well. It's quite popular, especially along the coast. So I think the tourists would also have to jump on the train and start using less single-use plastics as well.
Yeah. I think like if you make like a proper system, of the tourists having to be involved in decreasing their waste as well, or you said, tourism is quite high in Indonesia, and having a small amount of fee that goes specifically to waste management or something like that would be really nice, and having people who visit be more involved in waste management.
Yeah. Just looking into more alternatives, I guess, to how things are packaged.
Yeah, for sure.
Marine megafauna, manta rays, whale sharks, and sea turtles are often called the flagship species of ocean conservation. What do you think they teach us about the state of our oceans?
So yeah, they are called flagship species for a reason. Sometimes they're also called what we call umbrella species, where when you protect these animals, you also protect a lot of other animals below them. So, whale sharks, they travel a lot. So if you protect whale sharks, you're also protecting smaller sharks. You're also protecting smaller like reef fish, and also like coral reef ecosystems. And so they teach us how, one animal, one species, one entity in the ocean can really affect a lot of the other things too. I can't remember what it's called. It's like basically like you do one good thing, and like it's like a domino effect. So you protect manta rays, you protect whale sharks, and then it will naturally protect all the other beings in the ocean as well. And yeah, I guess that's one thing I see about manta rays, protection of manta rays and whale sharks is that, you start doing one thing and it will end up doing a lot of different good things to others.
And could you describe as a typical field day of your work?
So a typical field day for me would be to wake up quite early. Wake up quite early and go diving. So I would usually go out with my buddy to a dive center, and the dive center would change every now and then because we try to go out diving with different dive centers and maintain our relationship with the dive centers. But when we're out diving, we would usually give a briefing, like a turtle or a manta briefing to the guests, basically telling them what manta rays or turtles are, what to expect from them, and how to behave when you do encounter manta rays, turtles, whale sharks, or molas in Nusa Penida. And then we do our data collection here and there. A lot of taking photos. We do measurement sometimes, like we measure the mantas and turtles using what we call a laser photogrammetry. So we kind of use lasers to kind of measure. And then usually our day ends about in the afternoon, so maybe around 12 or 1 p.m. Back on the island, have a big lunch because it's so hungry. And then usually at around 3 or 4, I would come to the office again to do some of the post dive day work. We When we do have a time, we would just like quickly get through the pictures that we took that day. But the most important part is to go through our environmental log. So basically, that's how we count the number of dives that we've been and how many things that we saw, like how many mantas we saw, how many turtles, how many sharks, how many number of boats, how the current was like, basically all the environmental factors of things of our dives. And yeah, we finish our office work at around 5:30. And yeah, dinner, sunset and dinner.
Sounds like a long day if you start really, really early.
It is, yeah, it's so tiring. And you only feel tired at the end of the day, when you're like, wow, I'm so tired. And you're like, oh yeah, I went diving today.
Yeah. After diving, as you said, always hungry, always tired.
Always hungry.
And if you could inspire one major shift in how Indonesia or the world approaches marine conservation, what would that be?
I would tell people to go to the ocean more and see how beautiful it is, to give access to people, especially giving access to the coastal communities to snorkel, to see the reefs, to see the fish, to see turtles and mantas, and know that these resources belong to them. It's their responsibility to protect it and to make sure that the next generations get to enjoy it as well. A lot of our policymakers, they've never really been to the ocean. They try to make policies about manta rays without actually knowing what manta rays are, or where manta rays live, or never seen a manta ray. So if I could inspire more things to marine conservation, is that especially people who live in the coastline or people who live in an archipelagic country, and the policymakers, is to go out to the outdoors, see what you guys are talking about, and you decide from there, like, is it worth it to protect? Which usually is. No.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me and share your work with me. It was very interesting to hear all about your work. And I hope I will have you soon on the podcast again with new research results that we can talk about.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Sabine.